The invitation from my dear friends, Richard and Elizabeth, to stay at their luxurious estate while they vacationed in Europe was both a surprise and an honor. They were a wealthy couple who often traveled, and they trusted me, a longtime friend, to oversee their opulent home in their absence. Little did I know that this stay would plunge me into a nightmarish world of secrets and terror. Upon their departure, Richard and Elizabeth had warned me that a relative of theirs would be arriving in a few days. They assured me that he was trustworthy and that his stay was only temporary. They insisted I make him comfortable and accommodate any requests he might have. I agreed, of course, knowing that this was a small favor to repay their kindness. As the sun sank below the horizon on the appointed day, their relative arrived. I welcomed him into the lavish home. His name was Victor, a tall and enigmatic man with piercing blue eyes and a demeanor that was polite but oddly distant. There was something about him that set me on edge, but I attributed it to my own imagination. The first evening Victor retired early to his guest suite, and I went about my business, enjoying the tranquility of the sprawling estate. But as the night deepened, strange occurrences began to unfold. I was awoken by a distant sound, a mournful wailing that echoed through the house like a ghostly lament. It was coming from Victor's room. I rushed to his door, my heart pounding, and knocked loudly. "Victor, are you all right?" The wailing abruptly ceased, and Victor's voice, strangely calm, responded, "I'm fine. Just a bad dream." Relieved but still unnerved, I returned to my room, but sleep eluded me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly amiss. Over the next few days, I noticed Victor's peculiar habits. He would spend hours locked in his room, and when he did emerge, his eyes were haunted, his hands trembling. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he deflected my questions with vague answers. One evening, as I passed his room, I heard him muttering in a language I couldn't understand. I decided to call Richard and tell him what was going on with Victor. My heart sank like a stone in my chest as I listened to Richard's voice on the other end of the line. His words were like a death knell, a confirmation of the growing dread that had been clawing at my mind. "Victor called me," Richard explained. "He said his trip has been unexpectedly delayed, and he won't be arriving for another week." "Did he let you know?" My voice quivered as I responded, "Richard, Victor is already here. He arrived as planned." There was a moment of silence, and then Richard's voice took on an edge of urgency. "That's not possible, he's with us in Europe." My blood ran cold as the truth struck me like a thunderbolt. The man who had been staying in the mansion with me was not Victor. He was an impostor, a stranger who had insinuated himself into this opulent estate under false pretenses. As I hung up the phone, panic surged within me. I realized that I was trapped in this sprawling mansion with a sinister stranger, a man who had fooled me into believing he was someone he wasn't. It was a nightmare come to life. I had to act swiftly. Every step, every sound, sent shivers down my spine as I formulated a plan to confront the impostor. I couldn't wait for Richard and Elizabeth to return from their vacation. The danger was present, and I was alone in this house. Carefully, I crept to the door of the impostor's guest suite. The dim light in the hallway cast eerie shadows. With determination, I turned the doorknob, creaking it open. The room was dark, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. The figure in the room had his back to me, and I decided it was time to confront him. My voice shook, but I managed to say, "I know you're not Victor. You need to leave." The room fell into an oppressive silence, and I could feel the tension in the air. Then, slowly, the impostor turned around to face me. But he was not the same person I had seen before. His eyes were no longer distant and calm. Instead, they glittered with malice. His grinning expression revealed teeth that seemed too sharp, too predatory. A shiver ran down my spine. Without a word, the imposter lunged at me, and we tumbled into a frenzied struggle on the ground. I fought with all my might, but he was relentless and overpowering. His grip was like a vice, and his laughter was a bone-chilling symphony that filled the room. I cried out as his teeth sank into my arm, blood spilling onto the floor. He didn't stop, his laughter growing more maniacal with each bite. I felt his teeth graze my leg, and a searing pain shot through me as if he intended to devour me alive. But just when I thought my end was near, a chorus of sirens wailed in the distance, drawing nearer with each passing moment. The police had arrived, alerted by Richard, who had acted swiftly upon my call. With a final, desperate push, I managed to disentangle myself from the crazed imposter and scrambled away. The police burst into the room, their weapons drawn and faces etched with determination. The imposter was apprehended, his laughter silenced as he was overwhelmed by the authorities. This guy was a psychopath who had broken into my friend's mansion under false pretenses and was finally exposed. In the days that followed, the mansion was combed for clues and evidence of his malevolent intent. Richard and Elizabeth returned from their vacation, grateful for my bravery, and the mansion was cleansed of the dark presence that had infiltrated it. But the nightmarish encounter with the imposter had left scars that would never fully heal. I had learned that darkness can lurk even in the most unexpected places, and that trust can be easily manipulated. My friend's kindness had almost led to tragedy, and the horrors of that night would forever linger in the shadows of my memory.
The night was growing darker, the only source of light in my home office emanating from the soft glow of my computer screen. I was used to working late into the night. It came with the territory of my demanding job. The rhythmic clatter of the keyboard was my only companion as I toiled away, engrossed in the virtual world on my monitor. The clock struck midnight, a reminder of how time had slipped away. With a yawn, I began winding down for the night. I'd just saved my work and was about to close my laptop when an incoming video call notification jolted me from my drowsiness. My pulse quickened as I stared at the caller's identity, unknown. Curiosity mingled with unease, and I hesitantly answered the call. The video feed revealed a familiar yet eerie sight. It was my own street, the view from my front yard. My confusion quickly turned to fear as the camera angle shifted, revealing my house. My trembling voice whispered, "Hello? Who's there?" There was no response at first, only the disconcerting sight of my own home. Then, a deep, distorted voice spoke, cold and menacing. "You don't know me, but I know you, Sarah." My heart raced. "What do you want?" A sinister chuckle emanated from the speaker. "I want to show you how vulnerable you are, Sarah. How defenseless you are in your own home." My mind swirled with fear and confusion. "Who are you?" The voice taunted me further. "I'm closer than you think." I quickly ended the call, my heart pounding in my chest as I rushed to check every door and window in my house. Fear gnawed at my sanity as I fumbled with locks and latches, my trembling hands barely able to function. The minutes dragged on like hours, and my paranoia escalated with each passing second. I locked myself in my bedroom, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. This couldn't be real, it had to be some kind of sick prank. But the fear that gripped me was all too real. As I huddled in the dimly lit room, my phone buzzed with another incoming call. Dread pulled in my stomach as I answered, and the screen displayed the unnerving sight of my own front door. It was the same masked figure from before, shrouded in darkness. My voice trembled as I managed to utter, "Why are you doing this?" The intruder's voice, now chillingly close, whispered, "I want you to understand, Sarah, how fragile your existence truly is." My breath caught in my throat as the camera angle shifted, revealing the door's lock. With a sinister smile, the intruder reached out and began to manipulate the lock from the outside. Panic surged through me as I realized the intruder was trying to gain entry to my home. I yelled, "Stay away from me!" A sickening click echoed through the room as the lock gave way, and the front door slowly creaked open. My heart raced as I saw the masked figure step over the threshold and into my home. I knew I had to act. I hung up and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I whispered my plea for help. But just as the call connected, the intruder's voice interrupted, his tone now dripping with malevolence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sarah." Fear constricted my throat as the intruder spoke into the phone, revealing a chilling truth: he had somehow intercepted my 911 call. Panic surged as I hung up, realizing that the police wouldn't be able to reach me. Adrenaline surged through me, and I knew I had to escape. Without another thought, I rushed to the bedroom window and threw it open, my trembling hands grasping the windowsill. I had to jump, had to get away from this nightmarish intruder. With one final glance back, I leaped out of the window and landed with a painful thud in the yard below. Injured but alive, I barely got to my feet and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to get help, to escape the clutches of this relentless tormentor. As I sprinted down the street, my mind raced with questions. Who was this person? Why was he targeting me? My feet carried me to the nearest police station, a place that had always symbolized safety. The officers listened to my frantic account of the terrifying events, and together, we rushed back to my home, sirens wailing, my heart still pounding. I clung to the hope that the police would help me unravel this nightmare. But when we arrived, the very foundation of my reality crumbled. The door to my home was locked, as if nothing had happened. There were no signs of a break-in, no trace of the masked intruder who had tormented me just moments ago. Panic and frustration overwhelmed me as I realized the call history on my phone was missing. It was as if no one had called me, as if the entire nightmarish episode had been erased from existence. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, their eyes reflecting doubt and concern. One of them, a seasoned detective, approached me gently. "Miss, are you sure this is where it happened? There's no evidence of a break-in, and your call history is clean." Tears welled up in my eyes as I pleaded with them. "I swear, it happened. I saw that intruder, heard his voice, and my door was unlocked." The detective exchanged a look with his colleagues. They assured me they would investigate further, but their eyes betrayed their skepticism. To them, it appeared as though I was recounting a sinister nightmare rather than a real-life incident. As they left, I felt a suffocating sense of isolation. Had I imagined the entire ordeal? Was this some cruel manifestation of stress and paranoia? But deep down, I knew what I had experienced was all too real. Alone in my home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I locked every door and window, but the fear clung to me like a relentless shadow. The following days were filled with uneasiness. I constantly questioned my own sanity, wondering if I had truly experienced those horrifying events. But my fears were realized as the anonymous video calls began once again, each one more threatening than the last. The intruders seemed to revel in my fear, taunting me with their knowledge of my daily life. Despite my desperation, the police found no evidence to support my claims, and my friends and family began to distance themselves, believing I was suffering from a mental breakdown. I was trapped in a nightmare, alone and isolated, with no way to prove the terror that had consumed my life. I am currently writing this in a dimly lit room, my eyes constantly darting to the windows and doors, expecting the masked intruder to appear at any moment. My life has become a relentless cycle of fear, isolation, and paranoia. I'm no longer certain of what's real and what's imagined.
I had always relished the idea of a peaceful, solitary holiday break in my college dormitory. With most of my fellow students heading home for the long holiday, I saw it as the perfect opportunity for some uninterrupted study time. Stories of strange happenings have always been told in the dormitory, but little did I know that this decision would plunge me into a chilling nightmare that I would never forget. The campus was nearly deserted as I watched my friends depart, their cheerful goodbyes fading into the distance. I was left alone in the echoing silence of our once bustling dormitory, the empty rooms and vacant hallways stretching out around me. In the beginning, the solitude was a welcome reprieve from the usual college chaos. I could study without distractions, binge-watch my favorite shows, and indulge in late-night snacks without judgment. But as the days passed, an oppressive sense of isolation began to settle over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that there were unseen eyes trained on me from the shadowy corners of the dormitory. The sense of dread grew with each passing day, creeping into my thoughts and dreams. One evening, as I settled into my bed, I heard a faint whisper. At first, I dismissed it as my imagination, a trick of the wind or the creaking of an old building. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I rose from my bed and followed the sound, which seemed to be emanating from the hallway outside my room. The dormitory, once a place of laughter and camaraderie, now felt like a labyrinth of echoing voices, none of them human. The whispers led me to a door at the end of the hallway, a door I had never noticed before. It was old, weathered, and covered in dust, as if it hadn't been opened in decades. The whispers grew more intense, almost desperate, as I approached. With trembling hands, I turned the rusty doorknob, but the door was locked. With a little force I was able to break open the old rotten door and stepped into the room beyond. It was a small, dimly lit space filled with ancient furniture covered in dusty white sheets. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and mildew. As I ventured further into the room, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a collection of old photographs scattered across a cracked wooden table. They depicted college students from a bygone era, their faces frozen in time. But there was something chilling about their expressions, a mixture of fear and despair that sent shivers down my spine. As I examined the photographs, I realized that some of the faces seemed eerily familiar, like distorted reflections of my own friends and classmates. The room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the whispers grew louder, filling my ears with incomprehensible voices. Driven by a growing sense of dread and paranoia, I left the room. Determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the disturbing occurrences, I decided to delve deeper into the history of the dormitory. It was clear that something malevolent lurked within these walls, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I scoured the college library for any records or documents related to the dormitory's past. It took days of painstaking research, but I finally unearthed a series of old newspapers that shed light on the horrors that had unfolded here. The headlines were chilling. They spoke of a string of unexplained deaths and disappearances that had plagued the dormitory over the years. Students had gone missing, their rooms left in disarray, as if a violent struggle had taken place. Others had been found lifeless in their beds, their faces contorted in terror. The college had launched investigations, but the cases had remained unsolved, shrouded in mystery and fear. Students had spoken of hearing strange voices in the walls and seeing shadowy figures lurking in the dark corners of the dormitory. As I delved deeper into the records, I discovered an old journal written by a former student who had lived in the dormitory many years ago. His entries described a growing sense of dread and paranoia, eerily similar to what I had been experiencing. He wrote of whispers in the night, of being watched by unseen eyes, and of a room at the end of the hallway that seemed to hold a dark secret. He had ventured into that room, just as I had, and had encountered something so terrifying that he couldn't bring himself to describe it. The journal entries ended abruptly, leaving me with a sinking feeling that the author had met a gruesome fate. It was as if the malevolent presence in the dormitory had silenced him. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I was determined to confront whatever entity haunted this place. I returned to the room with the old photographs, the whispers growing louder with each step. The photographs themselves seemed to come to life, the faces contorting into grotesque expressions. I knew that the answers I sought lay within that room, but as I stepped closer to the table, a bone-chilling sensation washed over me. It was as if the malevolent force within the dormitory was warning me to stay away. Ignoring the warning, I picked up one of the photographs and studied it closely. The face in the picture seemed to shift and change, morphing into a grotesque, twisted visage. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and I felt a cold, clammy hand close around my wrist. I tried to pull away, but the grip was like iron. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was not alone in the room. A voice, filled with malice and hatred, spoke from the shadows. "You should not have come here," it hissed, and a sinister figure emerged from the darkness. It was a twisted, nightmarish version of a college student, their face contorted in agony and rage. The entity's grip tightened on my wrist, and I could feel its icy fingers digging into my flesh. It was as if it wanted to pull me into the darkness, to add my soul to the collection of tormented spirits that haunted this accursed place. With all the strength I could muster, I wrenched myself free and stumbled backward, my heart pounding with terror. The malevolent entity advanced, its form shifting and writhing, as if it were composed of shadows themselves. I knew I had to escape, to flee this place of unspeakable horror. As I turned and ran from the room, the whispers followed me, their voices a symphony of suffering that echoed in my ears. I burst out of the dormitory, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The malevolent presence seemed to seethe within the walls, its anger palpable, but for now, I had eluded its grasp. I never returned to that dormitory, leaving behind the nightmares and whispers that had tormented me. The malevolent entity remained trapped within its haunted domain, a place of unsolved mysteries and forgotten horrors. To this day, I can't forget the chilling experiences I endured, and I often wonder about the fate of the tormented souls who still reside within the accursed dormitory, waiting for someone else to unlock the door to their eternal torment.